So welcome back, everybody, to the Q&A with Bernadette Cronin and Regina Crowley. Wir töten Stella, We Murder Stella, or Killing Stella, has been first published in 1958. In this haunting, masterfully constructed novella, the first-person narrator, Anna, tells in retrospect how Stella, a young guest in her house, was driven to suicide by Anna's husband, Richard, and how she herself is complicit in this murder. Preparing this conference, I saw that the Cork-based theatre company Gaitkrash had just toured Ireland with a stage adaptation of Killing Stella. We had planned a live performance at the Austrian Cultural Forum at the time of the original conference last year. When Bernadette and I got in touch again some months ago due to the pandemic, she suggested to produce a version especially for the online medium. I would at this point like to thank the Austrian Cultural Forum and in particular Alexandra Wachek for her support in making this possible. Bernadette Cronin lectures in drama and theatre study at the School of Music and Theatre, University College Cork. She wrote her dissertation on contemporary German language post-dramatic theatre. Bernadette then also trained as an actor at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art and holds a diploma in translation as well. And she is a founder, member of Gaitkrash Theatre Company, together with Regina Crowley. Regina Crowley is an actor, director, and voice teacher and has worked professionally in theatre since the last 1980s. The third founding member of Gaitkrash is Mick O'Shea, who is a sound artist and has also collaborated on this video version of Killing Stella. This all has happened very fast, and so not many will have had a chance to see the video yet. It will, however, be available for 2 weeks at the Austrian Cultural Forum and later as a podcast on our website. Please stay muted from now on, but if anybody has questions to contribute or comments, that would be lovely through the chat. Can I start the questions by asking you, Bernadette, to take us back and tell us how you discovered Haushofer's novella for yourself as a piece of work that you wanted to translate and then perform?
Hello, everybody. Lovely to be here. Andrea, I was browsing in a bookshop in Berlin many, many years ago, and I came across this little edition of Haushofer's Wir töten Stella. I just picked it up and started reading and was just immediately drawn in. I just found the writing incredibly powerful. I found the perspective incredibly powerful. This character-bound narrator who's taking such an unflinching look at her own culpability. I was very interested in Austrian post-war authors. I'd had my head stuck in Ingeborg Bachmann's Todesaden trilogy for a long time because I did my master's on, it was a comparative study between Malina and Elfriede Jelinek film script adaptation. So I was very much immersed in the material, and here was Haushofer, and she was just, kind of grabbing me in a very different way. I found her writing very visceral, and like all brilliant literature, every time you go back to it, you find something else. And the fact that it just operates on so many different levels, there's the mythical, there's this panpsychic element in the story, that nature knows things that she can only intuit. I started reading around. I had the sense of it as adaptogenic, as Linda Hutchin would say in her theory of adaptation. There are all these sonic stimuli, this central leitmotif of the baby bird and the garden calling for its mother that keeps drawing her back into the present moment. The color symbology, the the red van that kills, sorry, the yellow van that kills Stella, and her name Stella Star. And I read Irmgard Röbling's interpretation of Your Töten Stella as an allegory of the Holocaust, and I just had the sense of its very strongly dramatic qualities as well. You know, it's the kind of the quintessential novella, isn't it? It has all the characteristics, the central leitmotif, this kind of taut terseness. It's like a coiled spring. This build up to the Wendepunkt, the turning point, or the Höhepunkt. I found Röbling's reading very compelling. That Stella is the stranger who comes in, and we never get an insight into her. She's othered. We never get an insight into her, into her thinking. So the kind of intrinsically dramatic qualities of the text. I was fascinated by it, and once I had read it and kept going back to it, it kind of wouldn't leave me go. I actually used to teach it to undergraduate students in the department where Katrina is lecturing now, and I always had it in the back of my mind. I would love to adapt this. I just thought it lent itself really to adaptation for stage, and began working it. I felt it needed a musician, or a sound artist. It needed a musical composition. To tell the story. How do you tell the story? There's so much text. There's so much words there. I had the idea. It needs to be maybe a 60-minute performance. You can't have an interval. It's too. The intensity of it wouldn't allow for that. So thinking pragmatically that it should be not longer really than 60 minutes as a performance. So I worked with the musician, with the cellist that we made the piece with for the theatre adaptation, and experimenting, exploring, play with objects, play with gestural language, play with sound, and eventually we agreed as a company that we'd Gaitkrash, my collaborators Regina and Mick, we agreed that we'd apply for Arts Council Ireland funding to produce it for the Everyman Stage in Cork, which is the main theatre venue here in Cork. And we were successful, and Regina fortunately agreed to come in as director, and Mick was involved in a more marginal way in the theatre production. He designed the intro, the soundscape at the intro, and the exigencies then of the pandemic and remaking for screen medium meant that we had to work very quickly, think on our feet and find solutions. But Regina will have more to say about that.
Thank you for this comprehensive introduction. I mean, it ties in with so many themes that we have spoken about in the conference, the way nature becomes something that rejects her, that knowledge and betrayal are symbiotic to how she experiences nature. Maybe I'd like to let Regina come in first before I ask a few direct questions that I thought of as I watched the performance several times in the last couple of days. Regina, would you like to talk about your experience with the text? You first encountered it as a translation already.
As a translation. So Bernie brought it to me to begin with, and she obviously, I felt it had gone into her, it was so under her skin from the outset. Bernie had a very deep understanding. So it was a curious process to come in as director then, to actually, sometimes I had to say, Bernie, you don't know. To find a new way. And I thought what I have found fascinating is directing it for stage and then recently doing it for film, but also film under the circumstances of pandemic, and finding two very different stories in many ways in the two different forms. As a director, as what was very exciting was that it was a story that was very new to hear on the Irish stage. It's not the female voice that's usually portrayed in the Irish stage, and it was. I think I had images of Paula Rigo. There's a certain brutality to the piece, and that is not that there's such a sentimentality and melancholy around the female, around the figure of the mother in Irish literature. So and no, in a way she doesn't. What's fascinating as a voice, she doesn't try to release herself of culpability. There's a cruelty in there as well, and a directness which is quite different from the storytelling that is usually within the frame of Irish theatre. So that was very exciting to explore on stage. The visceral, dramatic quality of the piece. So there were two very different adaptations, working with the same script, and also finding, I mean, in many ways, the story is about what is unsaid, and theatre is very good in many ways. What is not said is what's most exciting on stage. So within the adaptation, within the rehearsal room, Bernie had adapted it, and we found that less and less of the text was used. So it almost that you only use the lines that were absolutely essential. It was also, to some extent, my job was made easier in that Bernie had such a deep understanding of the character, but affinity. Also, Bernie is a wonderfully physical performer, so we use that very much on the stage adaptation. What I found fascinating was in the film adaptation, there's so much more softness, there's much more sympathy towards the character. In a way, the scream is just on the face, and we decided to very much focus on the face. So in many ways, I think it's a different Anna we hear. And I suppose in many ways, it's depending on who reads a story, it's a different story anyhow. So I think it would be fascinating to hear from anyone who saw the two different versions and what they heard in the character.
I find it's absolutely fascinating what you said about Irish literature, and also Paula Rigo, when you imagine these images of her as a dog, for example. But I think Stella is quite unique also in German-speaking literature. I mean, a character you want to empathize with, or you're almost sort of drawn into, but who turns out to be so guilty. And so that is amazing. The stage version, I have seen both. I mean, coming from having read the text so many times, it uses obviously really less of it and is very powerful in a physical way. Whereas I find the film version is really an enormously adequate way of representing the text in a similar way as the experience is similar to reading it. I mean, it is there in one flow. It draws you in very much. That was my experience. It would be lovely to hear from other people. I'm just not sure how many people have actually managed in this very short period of time to watch it. But please, if there's any comments, please put them in the chat. There's one bit that has particularly fascinated me, and that is the section that you called removing the stain. Because this was one of the many bits that one reads over very quickly, or that sort of falls out of the text. Why does she suddenly talk about cleaning? Can you comment on that? Because you made that a whole section, a short section?
For me, that also had to do with sounds in the text. You know, and I was thinking about adapting it. You know, I combed through and mined it for sounds and images and objects and gestures, and the sound of scrubbing, and of course it's just so it resonates again with Shakespearean tragedy, Lady Macbeth trying to scrub away the stains, and that there is no scrubbing away the stains, and but also you know, the subject of work and housework that has come up in the discussions. You know, I've been able to log on to a few of the discussions, which have been very interesting. But you know, it works on so many levels. On one level, you know, she was trying to little Annetta gets paint stains, doesn't she, on her skirt? And Anna is disgusted because she knows if she takes it to the dry cleaners that it'll come back like a you know, it'll have lost its her green velvet skirt. It will have lost its you know, it'll have lost its lovely quality. Thinking gesturally and sonically and symbolically, it just seemed to me to be quite a high point, but it's also kind of like hysterical. And I think the hysteria that comes out in the laughter. She laughs. Anna laughs when she's at the clinic and you know, sees the ground coming towards her as she's counting the leaves on this little hemp plant. And the nurse is very disapproving, but she also laughs when she comes home, and she laughs with relief. And that kind of element of hysteria that breaks through her contenance, her kind of her mask that she keeps firmly in place. So it's an agitation. The agitation I felt was important. You know, the action of scrubbing, both visually, sonically, and symbolically. That there's no redemption. There's no. She's. It's a very melancholic perspective, isn't it? It's the only utopian thing, and I think you mentioned that yesterday, Andrea. The act of writing. It's the only utopian gesture in the whole thing, that, you know, she has 2 days to write and to remember. That's the only redemption that I can see in this text. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that was a rather roundabout way of responding to your question. Regina might have other thoughts there on that.
Yeah, it was always one of my favorite moments, and I feel it's where there's a huge shift allowed. So just performatively and on stage, the idea of this huge release of energy, and there is a certain madness in the, you know, overly contained, the amount of containment. I mean, in a way, in the stage version, it's in opposition to the perfect pouring of water for the plants, that everything is so coiffured and exact, that that huge burst of energy, I think, for the performer. I think also suddenly the mask, I think, as Bernie has said, is broken, and it's a different human that is seen. I think it was more dramatic by far in the stage production, because the mask was more rigid in many ways in that. So there was a more dramatic shift. Whereas, interestingly, on film, because you were near the face all of the time, I think there was the cracks in the mask and the humanity were more visible from the outset. So we decided to not go as dramatic physically then as well. And also, it's a wonderful shift. And in many ways, it's the break. It's when she actually faces the facts that moment afterwards.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a really, really powerful scene. And also the sound was very impressive, how sound was used. You also make quite a bit of Cassandra, which is also the case in the film you have not seen, I understand, but that there is a film version that was made approximately at the same time as you were reworking it for stage, interestingly. Why did you find Cassandra, that quite short passage, so significant? Or at least it seemed to me you did.
I guess the identification of Anna herself with Cassandra, and she's the heroine for Wolfgang, for William, it just in terms of the name, I just chose William because the other names kind of lent themselves very easily to translation into English, and William just kind of floated up in my consciousness. But she's the heroine for Wolfgang, and up until then, of course, Anna herself, the mother, is also her son's heroine until youthful innocence is lost, and she knows that the relationship is broken forever. But Anna is Cassandra, isn't she? I mean, she knows what's coming. She sees what's coming, which she's unable to speak, or she can't bring herself to, because somehow she's broken, as she says herself. Something was lost in the accession to adulthood, and in the course of her relationship with Richard. So again, because the story operates on so many levels, and there is that kind of high tragic element in there as well. The Shakespeare, there's the ancient Greek tragedy, the unfolding, the fatality. We know this isn't going anywhere good. This story, but that whole process of choosing the elements, I regretted so much having to let go of so many of the elements, like Louise, Stella's mother. I just think as a character, she's fascinating and grotesque and hilarious. There was a little kind of a sense of if only we could kind of get her in there as well. But we had to abstract what we felt, was the DNA. What were the key elements of the story? How can you pare it back to the extent that you can create a performance that kind of has the right timing to tell this story, without losing the DNA of the story? And we felt that Cassandra was part of the DNA.
Cassandra is another of all these, double layers, because she, in her dream, she also throws stones at Cassandra. So she wants to reject Cassandra. But you're mentioning Louise. Did you ever consider it could make a play rather than a monologue? I mean, with other characters? Yeah.
Very early on. Did the other characters need to be there? But we work a lot with objects. In Gaitkrash, we explore play with objects, and it seemed that the most effective way to tell this story was through the character, a musician or a sound artist, and scenographic objects. That in the theatre production, the objects are all scenographic. The yellow ribbon that kind of wraps the golden cage, that's also the dungeon. It's also her locking herself in, being locked in, not being able to get out, and so on. Regina mentioned the watering can is symbolic of this Sisyphean kind of pursuit of household tasks, which is actually her anchor point, isn't it? That's what she clings to. Actually, an audience member came up to me after one of our performances, and she said, that watering, that's me. I recognize myself, that's me. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, it's also really interesting to hear about
you. I think for an audience member, the idea of using objects, rather, in many ways, it lets the story breathe even more. the idea, and I think we were very considered. You know, we went through quite a few variety of potential objects, and then we had something for little Annette, but then finally came upon a little chair that was just like Richard's. So, and the carbon copy, and I think for Bernie, then the storytelling was very clear when she had those objects to work with as well. But I think in many ways, as an audience member, I wonder if you shrink if the story is shrunk more by having one actor play all these characters rather than you, the possibility of imagining a whole host that everyone who reads it has their version, and again with these two versions, the possibilities even being very different again.
Well, I mean, for me, the video version works brilliantly. There is a film, a full-length film by the same director who made the film of Die Wand, which was very successful, and that is different. I mean, since he brings all the characters in, it loses the closed-up atmosphere, and he has to add so much to stretch it, and it just becomes something else. And I don't want to go into a discussion of it now, but I think, I mean, it lends itself in the first place very clearly to the monologue, and you have to think very hard if you want to do something else with it. I mean, anything's possible. I don't think the film by Pölzler worked that well. I think the video works really well in my view.
You had also asked Andrea if we'd seen the film. I chose at the time not to watch it. I just didn't want to at the time. I guess just to, you know, in relation to the creative process and you know, developing this character within myself and this world that we were creating. But I'm going to get my hands on it and and watch it. And the wonderful thing about a conference like this happening is that it sends you back, doesn't it? I mean, I'm not up to speed with contemporary critical writing around House so far, but all of these discussions that I've just managed to jump on are sending me back. She is such a fascinating writer, and like all great writers, I think she'll always be relevant.
This sounds like a very good moment to bring this section to a close. I'm very grateful that you were able to be here, and also to Regina's comments, and it was fantastic that you were able to produce the film for us in time. And it will be available, so I can recommend it to anybody. Thank you so much, Bernadette, and thank you, Regina. I think we'll stop the recording here and wrap up the conference.